Good morning. How are you doing today? I believe you are fine. I welcome you to today's class. In our previous class, we discussed on the Earth in space, and we defined the Earth as one of the planets that's living things such as animals, plants, and microorganisms where they live naturally. We also discussed the four layers of the Earth. We discussed the atmosphere, and it is the layer where gases can be formed. We discussed the lithosphere, and lithosphere is the solid part of the Earth where rock materials can be formed. We also discussed the biosphere. The biosphere is where living things can be found on the Earth. And we discussed the hydrosphere, that's the layer of water on the Earth. Also, we discussed the solar system, and we said the solar system comprises of the sun and the 9 planets. We listed the 9 planets: the Mercury, the Mars, the Earth, the Jupiter, the Saturn, the Neptune, the Uranus, and the Pluto. Also, we discussed the seasons of the Earth: autumn, spring, winter, and summer. And we discussed the seasons in Nigeria also. The long dry season, the short dry season, the long rainy season, and the short rainy season. I also discussed the month of the year where these seasons fall into. Now for today's class, we'll be looking at the concluding part of the topic, the Earth in space. The Earth in space. Let me share the screen with you. So the Earth in space continued. That is the topic for week 9. We're looking at the concluding part of the Earth in space. Now, before we see the details of our lesson, let's see our learning objectives. At the end of the lesson, the students should be able to, number one, describe the rotation and revolution of the Earth. Number two, discuss the rotation and revolution of the moon. Number three, divine eclipse. And number four, explain the formation of solar and lunar eclipse. So these are the learning objectives you must be able to explain at the end of the class. So we're discussing the rotation and revolution of the Earth, how the Earth rotates and revolves around the sun. Likewise, how the moon rotates and revolves around the Earth. And also we'll discuss eclipse and also the formation of solar and lunar eclipse. These are what we are going to discuss in today's class. So let's move on. Rotation and revolution of the Earth. When we talk about rotation, rotation means to turn round, So the Earth turns round on its own axis in an anti-clockwise direction. This is an anti-clockwise direction, while this is a clockwise direction. So the Earth rotates, it turns on its own axis in an anti-clockwise direction. And it takes the Earth to turn on its own axis 24 hours. So the Earth turns on its own axis for 24 hours. The Earth makes a complete turn on its axis for 24 hours. And the turning of the Earth on its own axis causes the formation of day and night. The turning of the Earth, the rotation of the Earth on its own axis causes the formation of day and night. Now let's move on. This is the result of rotation of the Earth. Now this is the sun and this is the Earth. This is the axis of the Earth. So the Earth turns on its own axis around the sun. Now, the half of the Earth, the part of the Earth rather, that faces the sun, we experience the day. That is why we said the rotation of the Earth on its own axis around the sun causes day and night. So people at this part of the Earth will experience the day because the half of the Earth as is turning is facing the sun, while the other half that is far away from the sun will experience the night. You can see darkness here. So this people here will experience the night, while the half of the earth that is facing the sun, people here will experience the day, while the other half that is far away from the sun will experience the night. So this is the result of the rotation of the earth. Now let's move on. Let's see the revolution of the earth. The earth also traces a circular path around the sun. As the earth rotates on its own axis around the sun, also the earth moves, that is, revolves around the sun. So the earth traces a circular path. The earth axis traces a circular path around the sun. Here we said that the earth revolves around the sun, and it takes the earth 365 days, which is 1 year, to revolve around the sun. So it takes the earth 365 days to move around the sun, to make a complete revolution, around the sun. So it takes the earth 365 days, which is a year, to revolve around the sun. Now also let's see the diagram of the earth revolution. So this is the earth revolution, this is the earth, and this is the sun. So the earth revolves around the sun, the earth moves around the sun. So when the earth revolves around the sun, then revolution occurs. Now, as I've said earlier, it takes the earth 365 days to move around the sun, to make a complete revolution, to move around the sun. So the time of one revolution is 365 days, which is 12 months, and this is equals to 1 year. Also, the earth revolution causes the 4 seasons that we discussed in the previous class. And the 4 seasons, which are the winter, spring, summer, and autumn, they are the results of the revolution movement of the earth around the sun. I believe you are following me and you understand the lesson. Now let's continue. Now let's see the rotation and revolution of the moon. As the earth rotates and revolves around the sun, likewise the moon rotates and revolves around the earth. As the earth rotates and revolves around the sun, so the earth rotates and revolves around the sun, but the moon rotates and revolves around the earth. Now, the movement of the moon around the earth is similar to the rotation of the earth around the sun. Now, it takes about 28 days for the moon to revolve around the earth once. It takes about 28 days for the moon to revolve around the earth once. Let's see the diagram also. So this is how the moon revolves around the earth, revolution of the moon. So this is the moon. And when the moon is very near to the earth, this is the earth and this is the moon. When the moon is near to the earth, we say the moon is at perigee. But when the moon is far away from the earth, we say the moon is at apogee. So this is the moon and this is how it revolves. This is moves around the earth. Let's move on. Now let's discuss eclipse. Eclipse. I've been hearing solar eclipse, lunar eclipse. What is eclipse and how does eclipse occur? An eclipse occurs when the sun or the moon cannot be seen, meaning that something is blocking the sun or the moon from being seen. So an eclipse occurs when the sun or the moon cannot be seen because the earth is passing directly between the moon and the sun, or because the moon is passing directly between the earth and the sun. So an eclipse occurs when the sun or the moon cannot be seen. An object is hindering the sun or the moon from being visible, from being seen. And this happens if the earth is passing directly between the moon and the sun. That is when the earth, the sun, and the moon, when they are in a straight line. That is, the earth is passing between the sun and the moon directly, or when the moon is passing between the sun and the earth directly. So we said an eclipse occur. At this condition, an eclipse will occur. Now, let's see the types of eclipse. There are two main eclipses that do occur. The eclipse of the sun, which is also called the solar eclipse, and we also have the eclipse of the moon, which is also called the lunar eclipse. Now, let's see the eclipse of the sun, also called the solar eclipse. Eclipse of the sun occurs when the moon gets in between the earth and the sun. Eclipse of the sun occurs when the moon gets in between the earth and the sun. That is, the moon is in between the earth and the sun. So the earth, the moon, and the sun, they are not in a straight line. So the moon will be blocking the earth from receiving light from the sun. At this condition, we said solar eclipse. So we term this condition as solar eclipse. When the moon is blocking the earth from receiving light from the sun, then solar eclipse will occur. I believe you understand solar eclipse. Let me come again. The solar eclipse, that is the eclipse of the sun, occurs when the moon gets in between the earth and the sun, thereby blocking some parts of the earth from receiving light directly from the sun. So when the moon is in between the earth and the sun, so the moon will be blocking the earth from receiving light directly from the sun. Solar eclipse will occur. Now let me give you the diagram, picture. This is eclipse of the sun. This is how the eclipse of the sun occurs, the formation of the eclipse of the sun. Now, this is the sun and this is the earth. By the time the moon is rotating around the earth and the moon gets in between the sun and the earth, then solar eclipse will occur. The moon will be blocking the earth from receiving light from the sun. As you can see, the moon, this is the moon, blocking the earth from receiving light from the sun. And you can see, this is the moon will cast its shadow on the earth. You can see the shadow of the moon on the earth. So this part of the earth, at this particular time, we experience solar eclipse. June 21st, this year 2020, in India, solar eclipse occurs. Solar eclipse occurs. Under the solar eclipse, so we can have a total solar eclipse and the partial solar eclipse. Now, this is the path of the umbra. So this umbra signifies a total solar eclipse. You can see this place is more darker than this place. So when the moon casts a shadow directly on the earth, then a total solar eclipse will occur. This part of the earth will be very, very dark. Then we also have penumbra. This is the partial solar eclipse. Penumbra is also called the partial solar eclipse, when we have a light shadow on the earth. So I believe you understand how solar eclipse occurs. Now let's move to lunar eclipse. That is the eclipse of the moon. Eclipse of the moon occurs when the earth gets in between the moon and the sun. When the earth gets in between the moon and the sun, thereby blocking the moon from receiving light directly from the sun. So eclipse of the moon occurs when the earth is in between the moon and the sun. And by the time the earth is in between the moon and the sun, the earth will be blocking the moon from receiving light from the sun. At this condition, we term it lunar eclipse. This is a lunar eclipse will occur, eclipse of the moon. I will come again. Eclipse of the moon occurs when the earth gets in between the moon and the sun, thereby blocking the moon from receiving light directly from the sun. So eclipse of the moon, also known as lunar eclipse, occurs when the earth is in between the moon and the sun. Thereby, the earth will be blocking the moon from receiving light directly from the sun. At this condition, lunar eclipse will occur. This is the eclipse of the moon. Now let's see the diagram. Also, lunar eclipse explanation. As we have said, this is the sun and this is the moon. So by the time the earth is in between the sun and the moon, so we said lunar eclipse occur. The earth will be blocking the moon from receiving light. And at this condition, the moon can turn red. And you can see this is the moon has turned red here. At this condition, the moon can turn red, and this end the moon is nicknamed blood moon. So when you hear about blood moon occurs when there is a lunar eclipse, when there is eclipse of the moon, when the earth is in between the sun and the moon, thereby blocking the moon from getting light from the sun. So lunar eclipse occur, then the moon can turn red. And this end the moon the nickname blood moon. Blood moon. Also, there is total lunar eclipse, that is the umbra, and also have the partial lunar eclipse, which is the penumbra, I believe you are enjoying the class and you understand the class, you understand the lesson rather. So this is all we have for the Earth in space, the concluding part of the Earth in space, our lesson for today. But before we conclude, let's do the summary. Let's do the summary of what we have learned so far. Reflect on the rotation and revolution of the Earth. And we said the Earth rotates on its own axis. It rotates on its own axis around the Sun. And it takes the Earth 24 hours to make one rotation. And the Earth rotation also causes the day and night. The half of the earth that is facing the sun will experience the day, while the other half that is far away from the sun will experience the night. It also will discuss the revolution of the earth. It takes 365 days. It takes the earth 365 days to revolve around the earth to make one revolution, and 365 days, which is equal to 1 year, to make one revolution. Also, we discussed the rotation and revolution of the moon. The moon also rotates and revolves around the earth, and it takes the moon 28 days to revolve around the earth. Discuss about the eclipse. We define eclipse as the condition whereby the sun or the moon cannot be seen, and this occurs whether the earth is in between the sun and the moon, or the moon is in between the sun and the earth. Discuss on the types of eclipse: lunar eclipse and solar eclipse. And we said lunar eclipse occurs when the earth is in between the sun and the moon, thereby making the moon thereby blocking the moon from receiving light from the sun. And solar eclipse occurs when the moon is in between the sun and the earth, thereby blocking the earth from receiving light from the sun. I believe you enjoy the class. You can read more on this topic from the included notes on the school websites and the recommended textbooks: Basic Science for Junior Secondary School Book 1 by Chiro Motuile, Expression Basic Science for Junior Secondary School Book 1, also by Chiro Irege Ito. With this, we've come to the end of the class. Thank you for listening. Please, I advise you to do your assignments and copy your notes from the school websites. Thank you for listening, and God bless you. See you in the next class. Bye.